The assignment to Tower 14 was a lifeline, a chance to escape the suffocating grind of the command center's fluorescent lights, endless paperwork, and the relentless chatter of ranger briefings. I'd been a forest ranger for 6 years, stationed at a national park in northern Maine, a vast wilderness of jagged granite peaks and ancient pines that seemed to breathe with a life of their own. The park was a paradox. Its sunlit trails lured hikers with promises of serenity, while its shadowed hollows whispered of those who'd vanished without a trace. My name is Evelyn, and I'd learned to read the park's rhythms, the chatter of squirrels, the mournful wail of loons across glassy lakes, the way the wind sculpted paths through the forest's canopy. But Tower 14 was a world apart, a solitary outpost perched on a rocky outcrop, its steel frame rising 60 feet above a sea of pines that stretched to the horizon, unbroken by roads or human presence. It was my home for the summer, a place where the silence was both sanctuary and sentinel. Watching as keenly as I did, I'd volunteered for the posting, craving solitude after a year of bureaucratic chaos. The Park Service had warned me about tower duty. Weeks of isolation, interrupted only by radio check-ins, with nothing but the forest and your own thoughts for company. Some rangers cracked under the weight of it, their minds conjuring phantoms in the dark, but I welcomed the challenge, imagining days of quiet reflection and nights under a starlit sky. I packed light, my duffel stuffed with essentials. A change of clothes, a worn copy of Walden, a tape player with cassettes of Springsteen and Fleetwood Mac, a kettle for chamomile tea, and a flare gun, its weight a reminder of the park's unspoken dangers. The hike to the tower was a 3-mile ordeal through dense forest, the trail a faint ribbon of packed earth, overgrown with ferns and moss, its edges blurred by decades of neglect. The air was sharp with the scent of pine resin, the ground soft under my boots, and the trees loomed like silent judges, their branches weaving a canopy that filtered sunlight into a dappled twilight, casting the world in perpetual half-light. By the time I reached the tower, sweat soaked my uniform, my breath steaming in the cool air. The structure was a marvel of utilitarian design. For steel legs anchored in granite, a narrow ladder climbing to a square cabin that hung like a crow's nest above the forest. The cabin itself was Spartan, a 10 by 10 foot box with a wooden desk cluttered with topographic maps and weather logs, a creaky chair that groaned under my weight, a bunk with a thin mattress, and a propane heater that hissed softly in the corner. A single window wrapped around the cabin, offering a 360-degree view of the pines, their needles glinting in the sun, their shadows pooling like ink at dusk. A two-way radio sat on the desk, its dials worn but functional, my only link to the outside world. I brewed tea, the kettle's whistle a comforting ritual, and unpacked my gear, arranging books and cassettes with care, as if order could tame the wilderness pressing against the glass. That first night, I radioed Carl, my supervisor at Tower 5, a grizzled ranger with a voice like gravel and a knack for cutting through bullshit. "All set, Evelyn?" he asked, his words crackling through the static. "No bears knocking yet?" I laughed, the sound swallowed by the cabin's silence. "Just me and the pines, Carl. I'll manage." His chuckle was warm, a tether to the world below, and I signed off, settling into the bunk as the forest plunged into darkness. The stars were sharp, countless, a tapestry untouched by city lights, and I fell asleep to the wind's low moan, dreaming of open trails and sunlit clearings. The first week was idyllic, a rhythm of routine that anchored me against the forest's vastness. I scanned the horizon for smoke, logged wind speeds and cloud cover, and listened to the forest symphony. Rustling leaves, chattering birds, the occasional snap of a deer's hooves on stone. The isolation was a balm, my thoughts unspooling in the quiet, free from the command center's noise. I read Thoreau by lamplight, his words about solitude echoing my own longing, and played Born to Run on the tape player, the music a defiant pulse against the silence. But by the second week, the forest sounds grew less comforting, more deliberate, as if the pines were whispering secrets I wasn't meant to hear. The radio's static felt alive, a voice straining to break through, and at night, the trees seemed to lean closer, their shadows twisting in the moonlight, forming shapes that vanished when I blinked. I dismissed it as cabin fever, a ranger's rite of passage. But the unease took root, a splinter in my mind that refused to budge. It was the third week, 2 a.m., when the radio crackled unprompted, shattering the cabin's stillness. I was half asleep, my mug of chamomile tea cooling on the desk, its steam curling in the chilly air, when a voice sliced through the static. "Evelyn," it said, calm but sharp, like a blade wrapped in silk. I flinched, tea sloshing onto the desk, and fumbled for the receiver, my heart stuttering. The voice was familiar, Robert, the ranger who'd manned Tower 14 before retiring 6 months ago. I'd met him once at a ranger picnic, a grizzled veteran with a dry laugh and eyes that seemed to see through you. But this voice was off, too smooth, like a recording played at the wrong speed, each syllable lingering too long. "You see the second one yet?" I nearly dropped my mug, the porcelain clattering against the desk. "Second one what?" I managed, my voice trembling, barely audible over the static's hiss. The radio crackled, and he chuckled, a sound that should have been warm but felt hollow, like wind whistling through a cracked window pane. "The figure. There's one by me, but I'm looking at a second near your tower. Don't tell me you haven't seen it." I swiveled to the window, moonlight casting jagged shadows across the treetops, the forest a sea of black that seemed to pulse with intent. The pines were motionless, their needles glinting like knives, but nothing stirred at the tree line. I grabbed my binoculars, their weight cold in my hands, and placed them on the sill, my breath fogging the glass. Pressing the radio's button, I forced steadiness into my voice. "I have no idea what you're talking about, Robert." The words were a shield, but my hands shook, betraying my fear. He drew out a long, as if savoring my confusion, the sound slithering through the static. "You will." It wasn't a threat, but the words carried a weight, a promise of something inevitable, like the first crack in a dam before the flood. I lifted the binoculars, my breath hitching, and scanned the tree line, moving slowly from left to right. The forest was still, the pines a wall of shadow until there, near a gnarled oak, a shape, black, humanoid, draped in a long cloak that seemed to drink the moonlight. It stood motionless, blending with the darkness. It didn't sway, didn't shift, but I felt its gaze, a cold pressure that pressed against my skin, as if it could see through the tower's walls, through me. I lowered the binoculars, my pulse a drumbeat in my ears, the cabin's air suddenly too thin. "Robert, are you messing with me?" I said, gripping the radio so tightly my knuckles whitened. "Do I sound like someone who has time for that?" His voice was sharper now, tinged with impatience, but there was something else, a playful edge, like a predator toying with prey. "Isn't it strange? They don't move, just stand there, like they're not real, but they are. Trust me, you'll see." He paused, his tone shifting, almost mocking. "If you listen closely, you can hear them humming. They're alive. It's how they communicate. You should check it out." Prod it with a stick. Another pause, then a laugh dry and grating. "I'm kidding." The line went dead, the radio heavy in my hand, its silence louder than the voice had been. I set it down, the cabin's stillness rushing back, a ringing in my ears that felt like the forest itself was listening. I stared at the figure through the window, still there, unmoving, its cloak a void that absorbed the light. Had it shifted? The shadows made it hard to tell, but the air felt thicker, charged with an unseen presence, like the moment before lightning strikes. I tried to rationalize it, a lost hiker, a trick of the moonlight, but the figure's stillness was unnatural, its form too precise, like a silhouette carved from the dark. My training urged me to log it, to call it in, but my instincts screamed to stay still, to avoid drawing its attention. The radio crackled again, and I lunged for it, relief flooding me at a familiar voice. "Tower 5, this is Carl. You reading me, Evelyn?" His gruff tone was a lifeline, tethering me to reality, his presence a bulwark against the dark. "Yes, I'm here, thank God," I said, my voice unsteady, the words tumbling out. "Carl, I need your help. There's someone out there, by the tree line, wearing a black cloak, just standing there." A pause, heavy with static, as if the forest itself was eavesdropping. "Evelyn, are you sure?" Carl's voice was cautious, almost reluctant. "No one ever sees." "I'm sure," I interrupted, my tone sharper than intended. "And Robert saw it too. He radioed me just now." Another pause, longer, the static swelling like a tide. I thought I heard Carl's breath catch, a faint hitch that betrayed his calm. "Evelyn, there hasn't been anyone stationed at Tower 14 since Robert retired. No one's been on that frequency for 6 months." My heart skipped, the radio cold against my palm, its weight suddenly oppressive. "What?" I whispered, glancing at the receiver as if it could explain itself. Robert had retired. I knew that. His farewell picnic was a vivid memory, his laughter mingling with the scent of grilled burgers and pine smoke. But the voice had been so close, so real, its cadence unmistakably his, or near enough to fool me. The cabin's air grew colder, my breath visible in small clouds, curling like specters in the dim light. "Carl, I just talked to him. He knew about the figure, described it exactly." "Evelyn," Carl said, his voice gentle but firm, a parent soothing a frightened child. "Robert's gone, retired. No one's at 14. You're alone up there." The words were stones, sinking in my gut, each one heavier than the last. I set the radio down, wiping my hand on my pants, the cold lingering like a touch that wouldn't fade. The figure was still there, a black void against the pines, and I couldn't shake the feeling that it had heard every word, that it knew my doubt, my fear. I reached for my tea, the mug's warmth a fleeting comfort, and tried to anchor myself in routine. I ejected the Springsteen cassette, swapping it for Fleetwood Mac, hoping rumors could drown out the silence. But as I reached for the play button, a sound stopped me cold. Thud, thud. It came from beneath the tower, not the wind's aimless rattle or an animal's scurry, but deliberate, like something testing the deck's strength, probing for weakness. I froze, my hand hovering over the tape player, the cabin's silence amplifying the sound until it filled the room. Thud, thud. It was rhythmic, purposeful, emanating from the base of the tower's ladder, a metallic clang that vibrated through the floorboards. I held my breath, straining to hear, but the forest offered no answers, only the faint rustle of leaves, like whispers in a language I couldn't grasp. I moved to the window, mug still in hand, its warmth a fragile shield, and leaned over the sill, peering into the clearing below. The moonlight was brighter now, painting the ground in silver, and there it was, closer, no longer at the tree line but halfway to the ladder, its cloaked form hovering inches off the ground. It didn't walk, didn't sway, just existed, its hood hiding its face. Yet I felt its gaze, a weight that pressed against my chest, squeezing the air from my lungs. The cloak shimmered, not cloth but something liquid, like ink defying gravity, pooling around the figure in a way that mocked the laws of physics. My breath caught, tea spilling over my fingers, the sting grounding me in the moment. I set the mug down, its clatter loud in the stillness, and grabbed the flashlight from the desk, its weight reassuring, a talisman against the unknown. Robert's words echoed, "You'd better lock your doors." But they hadn't come from Carl, had they? The voice had been too smooth, too knowing, a mimicry that chilled me more than the figure itself. I hesitated, fear warring with duty. Rangers were trained to investigate, to protect the park from fires, poachers, lost hikers, but this was no human threat, no natural phenomenon. Still, my feet moved, drawn by a need to know, to prove I wasn't losing my grip on reality. I opened the floor hatch, the metal cold under my fingers, its hinges groaning like a warning. The ladder stretched into darkness, its rungs glinting faintly in the flashlight's beam. I descended, one hand clutching the flashlight, the other gripping the ladder, each step a descent into vulnerability. The air was frigid, the forest's silence oppressive, as if the pines were holding their breath, watching my intrusion. My boots hit the ground with a soft thud, the sound swallowed by the clearing's vastness. I swept the flashlight across the pines, their trunks stark against the moonlight, their needles glinting like 1,000 eyes. "Hello," I called, my voice small, an affront to the stillness, like shouting in a cathedral. The beam revealed nothing but trees, their branches claw-like, reaching for the sky. I stepped forward, heart pounding, and scanned again, the light trembling in my grip. The figure was gone, the clearing empty, but the air felt charged, like the moment before a storm, heavy with unspoken intent. I stood there, exposed, the tower's silhouette looming above, its cabin a distant refuge. The silence was unbearable, a void that pressed against my eardrums, amplifying the thud of my pulse. I turned, climbing the ladder as fast as my trembling legs allowed, my breath steaming in the cold, each rung a small victory. Back in the cabin, I slammed the hatch shut, locking it with a click that felt inadequate, and sank to the floor, back pressed against the wall, listening for any sign of pursuit. The forest was silent, but the quiet was a lie, a predator crouching in wait. I grabbed the radio, my voice desperate, cracking with fear. "Carl, are you there? There's something out here." Static answered, then a faint reply, Carl's voice strained. "Evelyn, lock your doors." The words were his, but they carried a low chuckle, a sound that didn't belong, like a shadow cast by the wrong light. The line cut out, and I stared at the radio, Robert's earlier warning. "Lock your doors," looping in my mind, each repetition more sinister. Why had he said that? And why had his voice felt so wrong, so other? I checked the cabin's door, the lock clicking softly, but the sound was frail, a whisper against the forest's roar. The binoculars sat on the desk, tilted as I'd left them, their lenses glinting in the moonlight. I resisted the urge to look, to confirm the figure's return, afraid of what I'd see, afraid of what it would mean. The forest was dark, silent, but I knew it was watching, its gaze a weight I couldn't shake. I tried Carl again, forcing steadiness into my voice, though my hands trembled. "Carl, are you there?" Static answered, a low hiss that seemed to mock my plea. Then his voice broke through, cautious but unmistakably real. "This is Carl. Everything okay? Evelyn?" "Not really," I said, a nervous laugh escaping, brittle and out of place. "There's something out here by the trees. A silhouette wearing a cape or a cloak. It wasn't walking, it was floating, coming closer. I don't know how to explain it, Carl. It was staring at me, I think." The words spilled out, disjointed, a flood I couldn't stem. A pause, heavy with meaning, the static swelling like a heartbeat. "Tell me what you saw," Carl said, his tone calm but edged with concern, as if he was measuring each word. I rambled, my voice rising with panic. It was black, like a cloak, but it didn't touch the ground, didn't move like it should. It was just there, then closer without walking. And there's something else. Someone on the radio, I thought it was Robert, but I'm not sure anymore. He knew about the figure, described it exactly, told me to lock my doors, said there was another one near Tower 14. Another pause, longer, Carl's breathing audible, a faint rasp that betrayed his unease. "Evelyn, Tower 14 hasn't been manned for months. Robert retired. No one's on that frequency. You know that." My heart sank, the cabin's walls closing in, the air growing colder, sharper. "I talked to him, Carl," I insisted, my voice trembling. "He knew what I saw, described it like he was watching it too. How could he know?" "Evelyn," Carl said, his voice firm, a lifeline I clung to. "You've been up there a long time. It's easy to imagine things when you're alone, when the dark gets in your head. But listen to me. Stay inside. Lock your doors and windows, don't go outside. Do you understand?" "Yes," I said, nodding to the empty room, the gesture futile but instinctive. "I understand." "Good. I'll check the system and figure out what's going on. Stay inside." "That's an order." The line went dead, the radio's silence louder than Carl's voice had been. His words, "Don't let anyone in," looped in my mind, a mantra against the fear clawing at my chest. I reached for my tea, but my hands shook, the mug clattering against the desk, the liquid cold now, useless. Then it came again, thud, Thud, thud. Not from the ladder this time, but from the floor beneath me, as if something was knocking from below, its rhythm slow, deliberate, a heartbeat in the tower's bones. I knelt, flashlight in hand, my finger hovering over the switch, but I didn't turn it on, afraid to reveal myself, afraid to confirm what I already knew. The sound shifted, a rustling like fabric brushing against wood, coming from the ladder's base, not footsteps but close, deliberate, as if something was probing for a way in, testing the tower's defenses. I held my breath, the air thick with tension, the silence a taut wire ready to snap. The radio crackled, and I jumped, the noise shattering the quiet like glass. A voice spoke, smooth and familiar, but wrong, like a song played in the wrong key. Evelyn, did you think it would be quiet like this forever? They like to take their time, you know. They get close slowly, makes it feel earned. A laugh followed, grating, like nails dragged across a chalkboard. A sound that didn't belong to Robert, didn't belong to anything human. I lunged for the radio, shutting it off, the static dying instantly, but the laughter lingered, a stain in the air, seeping into the cabin's walls. I grabbed the flashlight and climbed the ladder to the tower's upper platform. A cramped room barely big enough for a cot and a single window, its glass fogged with my breath. I slammed the trapdoor shut, locking it with a bolt that felt too frail, and dragged a heavy crate over it, its weight a prayer against intrusion. My back pressed against the wall, I clutched the flashlight, its beam flickering as the batteries weakened, the light dancing across the room like a nervous ghost. I fumbled for spares, my hands shaking, fingers numb with cold and fear, and replaced them, the beam flaring back to life, a fragile shield against the dark that pressed against the window. Outside, the forest was a void, the pines invisible in the moonless night, their presence felt rather than seen. Then I saw it, a figure at the tower's base, cloaked in black, looking up. Its hood hid its face, but its gaze was palpable, a cold weight that pinned me in place, squeezing the air from my lungs. A soft chuckle rose, followed by a humming, low and resonant, vibrating in my bones, my teeth, my skull. I gripped the flare gun, its weight unfamiliar, its trigger heavy under my finger, a last resort I dreaded using. "Stay back," I whispered, my voice lost in the cabin's stillness, a plea to the dark. The humming grew louder, not just from the figure but from the forest itself, as if the pines were singing in sympathy, their branches swaying in a rhythm that defied the wind. I pressed against the wall, the flare gun trembling in my hands, the flashlight's beam dancing across the room, casting shadows that seemed to writhe. The radio crackled again, and I froze, Carl's voice cutting through the static like a lifeline. "Evelyn, you reading me?" "Yes, I'm here," I said, clutching the receiver, my voice hoarse. "Where are you, Carl? Please. I'm on my way, an hour out. Stay calm. Have you been feeling strange? Headaches? Dizziness? Anything off?" "No, just get here," I said, panic rising, the words tumbling out. "There's something outside, Carl. It's not human." The static surged, and a voice, not Carl's, spoke, smooth and wrong, a mockery of familiarity. "Evelyn, it's me. Let me in." It was Robert's voice, but distorted, a mimicry that chilled my blood, each syllable stretched and warped. The trapdoor rattled, a soft knock at first, then louder, insistent, the crate sliding slightly with each blow. "Evelyn," the voice said, "I'm hurt. Let me in." "Don't open that door." Carl's voice broke through, urgent, commanding. "Whatever that is, it's not Robert. It's not human. Keep it locked. Evelyn, understand." The pounding intensified, the trapdoor shaking, the crate's edges grinding against the floor. I held the radio to my chest, Carl's warnings barely audible over the noise, his voice a distant anchor in the storm. Then, silence, deafening, suffocating, a void that swallowed sound and hope. I waited, flashlight trained on the hatch, my breath shallow, but no sound came. I whispered, "Carl, hurry," my voice a prayer, a plea to a world that felt impossibly far away. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, time blurring in the dark. The cabin's walls a cage that pressed closer with each heartbeat. The flashlight flickered, its batteries dying, and I scrambled for new ones. The beam flaring back to life, its light a fragile defense. A chuckle rose from below, low and hollow, not human, followed by the humming. Now a chorus that shook the cabin, vibrating in my chest, my bones, my skull. I aimed the flashlight out the window, and there they were. Two figures now, one splitting from the other, like a snake shedding its skin, their cloaks shimmering, their forms blurring as if not fully real, as if they existed between worlds. The humming was unbearable, a cacophony that drowned out thought, filling the cabin with a presence that wasn't sound but intent. I grabbed the flare gun, my hands shaking, and shouted, "Stay back!" The figures tilted their heads, their unseen eyes boring into me, a gaze that felt like fingers on my soul. I fired, the flare streaking downward, its red glow illuminating the clearing, casting the pines in a hellish light. It passed through the closest figure, striking the ground harmlessly, the entity shimmering like a reflection on water, undisturbed, undeterred. They advanced, circling the tower, the humming a symphony of malice, the forest alive with their song, the pines swaying as if in worship. "Evelyn," Carl's voice crackled through the radio, strained with urgency. "Did you just fire a shot?" "They're here," I choked, tears streaming down my face, my voice breaking. "I shot one, but it didn't do anything. It passed through. Carl, it's not real, but it's here. Stay calm. Stay inside," Carl urged, his voice a beacon in the dark. "Don't engage them. Don't." The radio surged with static, and Robert's voice returned, soft and mocking, a serpent's hiss. "Evelyn, why won't you let me in?" A shadow loomed at the window, the glass creaking under an unseen weight, bowing outward as if pressed by a force too vast for the frame. I screamed, the flare gun slipping from my hands, clattering to the floor, and the window shattered, a cold wind rushing in, carrying the scent of pine and something older, fouler, like decay and starlight. The figure was inside, its cloak a pool of darkness, its hood empty, a void where a face should be, a nothingness that sucked at the light, the air, the world. It leaned closer, the humming deafening, a sound that wasn't sound but a presence, a hunger, and it whispered, "Evelyn." I screamed again, my voice raw, and the figure stopped, retreating into the dark, the cabin silent once more, the humming fading to a low vibration, a scar in my bones. I collapsed against the wall, clutching the flare gun, glass shards glinting in the moonlight, scattered across the floor like broken stars. The forest was still, but the silence was a lie, a predator's pause before the strike. Dawn broke, pale light seeping through the broken window, the forest a gray expanse below, its pines stark against the sky, their branches claw-like, reaching for the light. I hadn't moved, the flare gun pressed against my chest, its barrel digging into my ribs, my body numb, my legs aching from hours in the same position. The cabin was a ruin, glass strewn across the floor, the crate askew, the radio silent, its dial glowing faintly, a mocking reminder of its betrayal. Footsteps sounded below, deliberate, heavy, and I raised the gun, my heart pounding, my breath shallow, each step a hammer against my resolve. "Evelyn, it's Carl," a voice called, gruff and familiar. "Open up, kid." I froze, the voice a lifeline, but doubt gnawed at me. They could mimic voices, couldn't they? I'd heard Robert or something wearing his voice, and the memory chilled me. "Say something only Carl would know," I croaked, my throat dry, the words barely audible. A pause, then a gruff laugh, warm and human. "Last autumn's picnic, when Ranger Wilkes tripped into the potato salad. You laughed so hard you nearly choked on your sandwich. That's specific enough." Relief flooded me, tears spilling over, my hands trembling as I lowered the gun. I unlocked the trapdoor, fumbling with the bolt, and Carl's face appeared, weathered but real, his eyes wide with concern as he climbed in. He scanned the cabin, the shattered glass, the overturned crate, my trembling form, and his expression softened, though worry lingered. "You're freezing," he said, taking the flare gun gently, his touch grounding me. "Let's get you out of here." He helped me down the ladder, my legs wobbly, each step a battle against exhaustion and fear. The forest was silent, the tree line empty, but I felt the watcher's gaze, a weight that followed us, a shadow in the pines. Carl led me to his truck, its engine a low growl against the morning stillness, and helped me inside. The doors thud, a small measure of safety, though it felt fragile, a paper shield against the wilderness. I stared out the window, the pines blurring past, their branches weaving a cage above the trail. Words felt impossible, my throat raw, my mind a tangle of fear and doubt. Carl drove, his silence heavy, his hands tight on the wheel, until he spoke, his voice low, measured. "We sent a team to your location. They found signs. Methane exposure, maybe. Underground gas pockets can leak, cause hallucinations, voices, visions. It's rare, but it happens." I shook my head, bitterness rising, sharp and cold. "It wasn't gas, Carl. I saw them, heard them. They spoke my name, moved through flares like they weren't there." He sighed, his eyes fixed on the trail, avoiding mine. 3 other rangers reported similar incidents in the last 48 hours. Hallucinations, disorientation, elevated vitals. "They're fine now, but it doesn't add up, Evelyn." He paused, his voice dropping, almost a whisper. "At Tower 14, we found something. The bathroom door was locked from the inside, a hooded figure inside. It's gone now, the tower decommissioned. We're not going back." The words chilled me, the forest shadow lingering as we drove, its pines a wall of silence, hiding truths I wasn't sure I wanted to know. At the medical center, tests confirmed I was physically fine, my pulse elevated but normal, a word I despised, a lie that mocked my reality. The staff probed gently, "What did you see? How did it feel?" Their clinical tones unable to bridge the gap between their world and mine. The following month was a blur of evaluations, physical and psychological. The Park Service eager to tie the incident to methane exposure, a neat explanation that felt like a betrayal, a denial of the humming that still vibrated in my bones. Nightmares plagued me, the cloaked figures lurking at the edges of sleep, their voices whispering my name, but I told myself it was stress, isolation, anything but the truth that gnawed at me. Carl met me as I left the command center, his thermos of black coffee steaming in the cold, his eyes carrying a flicker of sympathy, though his face remained stoic. "You did good, Evelyn," he said, his voice gruff. "Followed protocol. Most wouldn't have held it together." He hesitated, his hand in his jacket pocket, as if weighing his words. "There's one last thing. The cleanup at 14, we found something. The bathroom door, locked from the inside. Whatever was there, it's gone now. We've locked the place up, decommissioned it for good." I nodded, the dread returning, a cold weight in my chest, and walked to my car, the command center's gates closing behind me. As I drove away, the forest loomed in my rearview, its pines a silent promise, a reminder that the watchers were still out there, their humming a vow of return, a hunger that didn't sleep.